I'm doing a little bit of outside broadcast here, and for to start, I'd like to get our representative down there in Tolpuddle, David McMullen. Are you there, David?
Hi, good morning, Crispin. Or good afternoon, sorry.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, afternoon. So you're down at Tolpuddle at the moment. Obviously, no one's there, but you're preparing it for everyone. Can you show us around? Where's that? That's the big dining room you got there.
It is. So this is
your tent?
This is what we call the South Field here at GMB. What the TUC called them down there. But we're going to have a bar here, some live bands. We've got posh showers. GMB members can camp here for free. So this is basically at the bottom. So this is the main campsite. And then walking up, you can see in the distance the main stage. So that's where Billy Bragg and Rob Johnson and people like that will be playing on Sunday. I'll just take you up there and show you a little bit more about there. Just bear with me.
Have you been to the Tolpuddle Festival much yourself in the past?
I have, yeah. Last 2 years it hasn't really run, but before that I've been down here the 4 years previous to that. So yeah, been here many a time. It's one of the highlights of the calendar year. It's quite good to come down and recharge your batteries, surrounded by like-minded people.
Yeah, and the weather is the weather looking good for the weekend, or is it going to be too hot? What do you do if it gets too hot? Is there a place you can cool off?
There is. There's lots of water stores. There's lots of shade. At the moment, because it's overcast, it's not too bad actually. It's a little bit muggy, but it's certainly doable. So this is the main road where everyone will form up on the Sunday, and you march down to the Tolpuddle tree. So this will be lined with people with banners, and this is the main bit that's here all year round. So even if you can't make it down this weekend, if you're ever passing, you've got the Tolpuddle Museum, you've got the gift shop, and this, like I say, is here all year round. This is the main statue for the Tolpuddle Martyrs. And just behind here, you can see the main stage. So that's where Mick Lynch will be talking. That's where Billy Bragg will be playing and Rob Johnson. And then from there, we start going into the main TUC area. Right. Sorry, bear with me while I work my way across.
So I'm trying to give you a bit of exercise.
If people haven't been down here, I would definitely recommend it. It's really good to come down. Everyone's laid back and chilled. Lots of pubs, lots of bars. You have the Radical History School that runs all week. So people can come down here earlier on in the week, but the main festival starts Friday to Sunday. So they're still setting up.
Wow.
So here we have, hopefully he hasn't succumbed to heat exhaustion, he's just having a rest. No. You're just live broadcasting on not the PMQ's questions. Do you want to say a bit, or because this man runs the place down here all year round? If you're ever down here visiting, come and say hello.
Working way too hard.
We can see.
He's now swimming in a sea of red.
Excellent. That's what we want the whole country like that, really, don't we?
Right, well, it looks really good what we've got there already. So I'm sure it's all great. Thank you for coming on. I've just got Jeremy Corbyn on the
go for it
on the line here. Jeremy, are you there?
Yep.
Great to see you. You're in Parliament. Is that air conditioned where you are?
No. No, I don't think it's air conditioned. It's quite hot actually, because it's the top floor of Portcullis House. And as you know from your physics lessons, heat rises, hot air rises. But the architects of the building are absolute geniuses, every last one of them. So none of the windows open.
Oh, so I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah,
don't worry, plenty of people have a far worse situation than we do. It's all right.
Well, we've got Sri Lanka later on, so that's going to be interesting to find
out.
Yeah,
there's a statement on Sri Lanka, or an urgent question on Sri Lanka in a very few minutes. So after I've finished talking to you about Tolpuddle, I'll go into the chamber for that.
Now, can you, because you haven't got long, and obviously you're multitasking, a bit of lunch. What's
No, I've completed. I had a cereal bar. I mean, it's done. The lunch is over. It's finished.
Okay, all right. Well,
Well, I'm sorry. It's just the last
fine.
bit of
Well, you
fibre
have
has
to.
gone in.
Yeah,
No,
that's fine.
I
So
apologise.
it's fine. No problem. What would you say about Tolpuddle as a historical lesson for everyone at this moment?
It's huge. It was as you know, the story of the farm workers who were facing poverty and destitution from land enclosures, from the industrialization of farming, from the huge profit taking that happened from the newly industrialized farming of the early 19th century, and the loss of common land and access to farming land for farm workers out with the money they earned or didn't earn from the big landowners. And it was the change from rural agriculture to industrial agriculture, which was then morphed into industrialized farming. They formed a union. They swore an oath of allegiance to each other on the Bible and were convicted at Dorchester Assizes and deported to Australia. But it had a massive effect. It had a massive effect with a huge campaign to bring them back. The newly formed trade unions, Grand National Consolidated Trade Union and others, which represented general working class rather than the guilds, which represented highly skilled and highly restricted skill sets like silversmiths, goldsmiths, and so on. And that campaign was ultimately successful, and most of them came back to Britain and continued their lives. And so it was a successful campaign, and it did eventually end up with the right to assembly, the right to join a trade union. So they're often seen as the foundation of trade unions. And the TUC recognized this historically by the building of the farm workers' cottages in the village of Tolpuddle, which is still there, and the annual Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival, which I've been going to ever since I was a kid. My mum and dad took me there as a child, and I've been many, many times. And it is an amazing festival because it is a festival, yes, of celebration. It's also about the power of the working class and rural voices, and a reminder that left socialist, radical, environmentally sustainable ideas are very strong in rural as well as urban areas, and too often the left give up on rural areas and just assume it's only industrial areas or intensely urban areas that matter. Not true. There are plenty of radical people in the country area. Indeed, I grew up as a very small child in Wiltshire, then moved to Shropshire when I was older, and my mum and dad lived in Wiltshire and wrote a history of their village, including the history of the Captain Swing riots that happened in their village and the way in which the landowners opposed the rights of farm workers. But it's not the only festival. I was in Jarrow a couple of weeks ago for the Jarrow Martyrs. And again, it was very interesting. There was one miners' leader, early 19th century, was executed and his body was cut up, made into a display in a wrought iron cage that was then towed around all the mining villages around Jarrow and South Shields and North Shields to show to the others, this is what happens if you stand up for the working class. 6 other miners were deported to Van Diemen's Land, now Tasmania, at roughly the same time as the Tolpuddle Martyrs. The Tolpuddle Martyrs were not the only ones, although they are the ones that are quite rightly celebrated. And we had the Jarrow Festival. There was about 500 people came to the event we held in the centre of Jarrow. Dave Douglas spoke, he's a former miner, Kate Osborne, myself and others. And I just think it's about the rebirth of knowledge and experience of our labour movement history. And I'm going to the Peterloo Memorial on the 14th of August in Manchester, obviously. But again, there's another one that's broadly similar, and that was the Cinderloo massacre in Shropshire, where the County Assizes deemed that those that were rising up against the levels of poverty that existed roughly the same time as Peterloo. And the dragoons were sent out to confront working class communities that were rising up against poverty, rising up against the appalling working conditions in what was then, as it is now, a industrialized and rural area. Cinderloo massacre ought to be remembered just as much as Peterloo, in the same way Jarrow should be remembered just as much as the chain makers or of Tolpuddle. But what I think is exciting is over the past 5-10 years, there's been a whole growth in the local exploration of labour movement history and learning the lessons from it and taking it forward. And I think that is what we should be doing. So I'm looking forward to being in Tolpuddle on Sunday. Sadly,
You're coming to Tolpuddle, are you?
just for the one day. Yeah, I've got lots of things on in the constituency on Friday and Saturday. Otherwise, I would love to have gone for the whole 3 days, but I've never actually managed the 3 days.
I know you've got to go. Just before you go, what's your feeling about the trade union militancy that we're seeing more of in the last few weeks, especially the RMT starting it off? Are you optimistic about this?
Extremely optimistic. I was in Durham last weekend, and it was enormous, possibly the biggest it's ever been. It was absolutely huge. New bands appeared, new people appeared, and it was a great event, which was exciting to be at. But what was interesting was all the speeches from all the union representatives. They weren't all famous names. There were also many emergency workers and others that spoke who ought to be famous for the huge work they've done. They all said, we don't really care what politicians or the political establishment say. We're fighting for jobs. We're fighting for wages, we're fighting for fair conditions, and we're fighting for the next generation. And so what we've got is a big increase in industrial action, but it's different this time because all the unions, as far as I can see, seem to be working together on these issues. And it's also including people in other areas were not traditionally unionized. Now I'll finish on this because I know you want to get on, Crispin. On Friday evening, we had a very good meeting of People's Assembly in the town hall in Durham. It was packed out. And the point I was making there was that the unions should celebrate the heroism of the past, but celebrating the heroism of the past doesn't actually take us very much further forward unless we learn the lessons of it and recruit into trade union membership that whole new generation, young people, gig workers, insecure contracts. And also the unions as a whole, and this is beginning to happen, have got to be much more involved in communities and community action, community organizing, community socialism. That's what I want, community socialism, because a lot of people are socialists. And that's what our book is about, Why We Are Socialists, which the Peace and Justice Project are producing. No more than 500 words tell us why you're a socialist. It's in the community. When you work to build a community centre in your area, when you work to defend a hospital, when you work to improve a school, when you work to prevent a piece of open space being built over, all the kind of campaigns we're all involved in all the time, or you stand up for a community where jobs are under threat and all the issues that we face all the time. That's community socialism. I'm very proud of it, the way it's developing.
Yeah, well, you've inspired lots of people to get into community politics. So thank you as well for coming on the show. And I know you're busy. We've got an interesting discussion about Sri Lanka coming up with live feed from Sri Lanka, I hope.
Yeah, good. There's as I said, there's a question on Sri Lanka in Parliament in a moment, which I'll go in for. And this is the first time I've done a call to you from my office in Parliament. So the picture you see behind me is El Gato. And above that is a very clever reproduction of an oil painting I bought in Romania, which at one level looks like a rural scene. But if you look behind it, it's actually a 1930s painting of farm workers scything wheat and so on. But behind it is a power station and a railway line. That was the industrialization of Romania at the time. So it was probably 1930s, 1950s, perhaps something like that. So it always reminds me of the way in which skills must be preserved, but also developed and changed into the new demands we all face. Technology should work with us and for us, not be used against us.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to talk about Tolpuddle at the end as well. We've got to move on and learn from the past and use the same principles in the present to fight against injustice and for solidarity, I guess.
And I like Joanne Harris's comment just now on the chat box about the Unite's community program gaining more support. Yes, I think the community branch of Unite is really good, and I think that is a good model of the way forward, where you join a union, you stay in the union all your life. A bit like the PT in Brazil, which developed from exactly the same kind of source.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Crispin. Well done, you, as ever.
Oh, cheers. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Now, we've got people on the call who are going to Tolpuddle, but we've also got Harry Rogers, who's a bit of a historian on what happened in Tolpuddle. Harry, are you there?
I am.
So, Harry, can you tell us? I mean, Jeremy said pretty much everything that could be said about what happened at Tolpuddle, but do you have anything to add to what Jeremy said about what could be learned from?
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a bit to say, really. It's interesting that Jeremy arrived for this program because, you know, I wanted to talk quite a bit about what's going on at the moment in terms of the Labour Party and the way it's behaved towards him in particular, because it does fit in precisely with the way in which the Tolpuddle martyrs are relevant still today for trade unionism and trade unionists and socialists. So, you know, if it's all right, I'll crack on and just.
Well, we've got to 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah. I'll get through it in 5 minutes. I'll go as quick as I can.
Just so I can get the Sri Lankans in.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right.
Okay, Crispin. So in these times of intense austerity, it's important to remember those activists from times past who bravely stood against the tyranny of capitalist exploitation aided by the ruling class. On the 15th of July, the Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival returns, and the state terrorisation of socialists and trade unionists, such as the Tolpuddle Martyrs, continues today with Priti Patel's new laws designed to scare people away from participating in collective activism. This Tory government know their policies will lead the working class to use their only weapon, strike action, to challenge them. In the 19th century, employers believed they had carte blanche to pay workers what they wanted. When the 6 agricultural workers, the Tolpuddle Martyrs, formed their friendly society, they made it clear they would not work for less than 10 shillings a week. The employers cut wages to 7 shillings a week and were proposing to cut to 5 shillings a week. The activism of the Tolpuddle Martyrs led to the state using arcane legislation to their deportation to Australia as common criminals. 800,000 people marched in London a year later in one of the biggest demonstrations in history up to that date, and the sentences were overturned. The trade union and labour movement owes a massive debt to these workers who stood up to their oppressors, and it's right to celebrate their memory. But I find it interesting that today the modern Labour Party offers little solace or support to workers whose pay has been decimated by over a decade of austerity and pay cuts, especially in the service sectors. It's encouraging to see trade unionists making a stand as the economy is careering into recession, as Jeremy just said. And we all look across the myriad of social media platforms and see disenchanted socialists who have left the Labour Party or been expelled as they call for an alternative party of the left. And this is tricky as there are entrenched historic ideological differences between existing left groupings. Attempts to bring a socialist alliance to challenge Labour as an electoral alternative have failed time and again throughout my 75 years of existence. To be frank, I am a bit pissed off at the constant nitpicking about which group has got the correct line. Starmer in the extreme centre, the Tories, the CIA and all the capitalists across the planet love it when the left tear lumps out of each other instead of focusing on their enemies in Parliament. In my view, it's sad that Jeremy Corbyn's leadership was attacked so viciously by right-wing and extreme centrists within the Labour Party. The administration and the bulk of the PLP and elements of traditional Labour movement conspired to bring about the failure of those of us who worked so hard to make for the many and not the few manifesto a reality. That manifesto was clearly popular with large sections of the electorate. I worked hard in Ceredigion CLP as its chair, but following the 2019 debacle, when centrists conspired to bring about the downfall of Jeremy, and then in 2020 withdrew the parliamentary whip, I couldn't, in all honesty, remain in that party. And so in June 2020, I resigned from the Labour Party. I joined Left Unity Wales in September 2020, and I'm still a member. As I see it, this Tory government is still in power in large part because the extreme centre did not support the leader of the opposition and the manifesto drawn up by Labour Party membership. Now we see a government in crisis with a Starmer-led opposition not able to offer even a modicum of support for trade unionists on strike, fighting for a fairer deal in the teeth of their living costs. This is why large gatherings of socialists and trade union activists at events such as Durham Miners Gala, Levellers Day and the Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival are important for a variety of reasons. The most important of these is the affirmation of the importance of collective action against injustice inflicted upon workers. It's good for activists to know they're not alone, that there is collective strength. The Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival takes place on the 15th to the 17th of July as the RMT, Unite and the other unions stand firm with their members in struggle against the awful government. With such gatherings, these bring us all together. This weekend, many of us involved in the fight for peace, justice and equality will be out there organising together for a socialist future. Live, hope and act.